was very much, I think it's a great opportunity to begin, a great task to begin the discussion, in that it brings in the aspect of digital as a new hybrid space, as hybrid space that is both global and local in ways that we are not perhaps ready to appreciate or understand. How something that is supposedly or purportedly or in theory accessible on a global level can also be can also create a locality in a way, a local group of visitors, of interested parties, of communities even online, and how much we find unexpected islands on this network of potentially global outreach. I was very much impressed when I visited Iran. I think it was last year, but it seems like, I don't know, ages ago after this COVID situation. And I realized that people actually use their own apps, they have their own internet in a way. It's it's something that is, again, something that we expect to be global, but it's also super local. I mean, I had no idea that these apps ever existed. So okay, we're sort of short on time, so I will ask some questions now, and you have maybe a couple of minutes to respond. I would like to, okay, in the order of the speakers. So first to Marlon Mugi, we have a question from the audience, from Vasilis Balaskas. Hello, Vasilis. A quick question: if you have in mind that the museum inside me would eventually lead to an exhibition, virtual or physical, and how would it preserve its character as a shared space? I suppose if it's turned into a more permanent exhibition.
That's a great question, and our big challenge. And it was one of the questions we raised to ourselves and to our followers in June, in order to go decide what is the next step, how we can leverage this first phase of getting together online and create something in physical terms. And from the answers we got, most of them were very, very keen into continuing in the physical space, really getting together and meet as humans, have the human connection, not in cyberspace, but from near. Of course, we didn't manage to do that over the summer, and now in lockdown too, it's difficult. But this is something we have very much in mind. And more than anything, have in mind of how we can continue this community and engage it more and more. As I was listening to the brilliant speakers that followed my presentation, I was coming again with this thought in mind: how we keep our projects sustainable, and what does it take to keep them ongoing? Because working with audiences is very labor and time intensive. I wouldn't say consuming, because it's something that you really invest on. It's very valuable to invest on human connection, but it takes time and takes a lot of energy. And especially with projects that are side projects to our professional lives, it's very, very difficult to maintain them. So I think we need to develop models of co-governance in these projects. Really think a lot about core values in human society, like showing trust, ask a commitment from ourselves and from our audiences, and be ready to give authority and ownership to others, and not really keep the control always. From this first experiment to show out to the museum concept, how museum can be within us all the time, not within a museum institution, but in society as a fluid river that goes all around and connects us, or sometimes also disconnects us. But we need to think of how we can co-govern these initiatives in a very open and systemic way. So one question for me is how we can create these methodologies and processes of giving authority to others, and not by giving out and losing sense of the project, but giving out in order to have a really polyphonic approach, not only in the collection and the stories collected, but also in the way we can govern. We tried a few things also of how we could engage our audience in the museum inside me to be curators of small exhibitions. It worked partly. Perhaps the timing was not perfect because it was a call during a time that in the summer that everyone was out and living a real life beyond virtual meetings all the time. So there is a lot to think about that in the near future. I don't know if I answered the questions.
This was actually, yes, I think this is along the lines of what we're all thinking about. I mean, how to, first of all, how to, in a way, reiterate the physical contact in museums, institutions, communities after the pandemic in a way. So how to rebuild community after the pandemic, and how to maybe imagine new institutions of decision making that have been in a way created even through digital communication during these difficult times. So I think you not only answered the question, you actually made a great opening to my next question, which goes to Rolf. And it's again a question about governance, about making decisions together and putting them into effect. And it was my question, and I think the question that maybe pesters everybody in the room, that is from Greece or the Balkans or I don't know where else in the world. It's I think, from my experience at least, it's one thing to have people make decisions, and then there is the question of putting these decisions in effect, putting them in practice. So we live in cultural areas, let's say, in states where the state is very much restricted in what people, the grassroots, can do, especially in terms of heritage management, managing their own heritage. So although we're very much supportive of building democratic institutions and having people decide what to do for themselves, when the time comes to implement these decisions, then there is a very much, it's actually, okay, it's put it in a way, it's very difficult with that. So how, in your experience, how easy, how possible it is for people to actually put into effect decisions that they have made collectively in institutions regarding heritage or their own heritage?
That in my experience, there's always an element of interpretation. I mean, the management of an institution, an organization that heavily interacts with the community, the management will always have to make this decision. You can make informed decisions, you can co-create a lot of things, but the management cannot sort of just put it aside and say, let the majority decide. That's not the way to do it. It's much more like, there's a many decisions to be made. There's strategic, tactic, and very sort of down, basically daily decisions and so on. And I think that the key is to build a culture where the institution is regarded as very open, very receptive, very understanding of community needs. And because community needs are also very different. I mean, there are small communities within the communities that has different views on different issues. So there will always be situations where the management will have to make the final decision and trying to accommodate the different needs of the different communities within the community. So it's a relatively complex thing, but I think the important thing is that the institution has a general culture of openness, receptiveness, and try to facilitate the democratic discussions, discourse within the community in its parameters, and try to, you could say, give the not so vocal communities that are present a prominent position. So the people that has previously not been heard, the people who are not so vocal, because that for libraries is really one of the key issues, that the libraries are, we are here also as a kind of social entities. We should sort of promote the voices of the previously unheard, in my opinion. So it's probably a little different towards museums, but I think basically that the thing is to have an internal in the institution view on your institutions as owned by the people. It's not your specialists, it's not the librarians, it's not the museum people that owns their institution. It is of course, depending on the mission, you could have a national mission, or you could have a mission that is more diverted to or directed to the local community. So depending on that, that will also be a decisive matter. Of course, it's always the mission that will drive the that was kind of how I approach it.
Thank you very much. It was a thing. It put me in thoughts of actually regulating the level of decision making and acting more like a facilitator for alternative voices to come forward and find some sort of expression into decisions that are finally made by the management, or the scope of the project itself, maybe in a more inorganic way. Let's not put everything on the management of institutions. But also there's this question of how to achieve this intermingling between hard and fast goals that have specific economic outcomes for the institution or for a government, with the let's say softer and very much plural and different cultural aspect of the people. And as you yourself very well pointed out, even when we think about community as something unique and bound in place and time, there are several groups within this community that are, may have very different opinions about what makes it, what constitutes it, what it's about. I don't know if Elgidius is still online. I can't see him. Elgidius, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I can see you now. So yes, this is also a question for you. I mean, you've already pointed it very, very well in the comments section here in the chat, that there's a distinction, a gap between the tangibility of monuments, sites, and objects that is important for government in Tanzania, and what is important for local communities, which is, we could call it intangible. There, for example, the spiritual meaning
Yes.
embedded in these monuments. And how do you find that this can be reconciled in a way?
Yeah, there is a very big challenge from the side of the government, particularly here in Tanzania, where heritage is no more protected for heritage side, kind of, but it is being protected just for economic value. And this is very dangerous, because if any economic aspects are attached to the sites, decline, then automatically the sites will not be operational. They're not going to be looked at all. But for the local people, they are their own sites, which they are not using for economic purpose, but they're using for spiritual healing. They're using it for ritual purposes. And unfortunately, some of these sites, which the government see as economic engines, they are the same sites that they are providing social healing to the people. And I can cite the example of the rock arts in Kondoa in central Tanzania. These people visit these rock arts with local beer, with chickens, with bread, and they will celebrate while they are there. But for the government, these are activities that will limit visitors, that will be seen as things that are not really done by people who are not civilized, and they would wish to see these people doing it away from the sites, and that brings some sort of conflict between these two groups. So the major initiative here is try to convince some of the stakeholders and say, look, what is heritage from these two groups should be combined, bring together the people, discuss the best way to try to see. And this is not new, actually. From Great Zimbabwe, where Bandoro is writing about your monuments, our shrine, where the government looks at sites like monuments, but the people look at these as shrine. So we really need to come together, come to the table and try to discuss how these two aspects should be combined such that we protect one another. Because if we don't protect the intangibles, which belongs to the people, and then the people will not protect the tangibles which belong to the government and which the government wants to see. That's why I can cite an example of one of my correspondent in one of the villages. He says, unless you value our sites, we will not value you as well. So I think there is a need to come together and protect the sites, considering the multiplicity of these sites. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. It was I think it was a response that resonates with a lot of our experience from similar work. I realize now that I come out in stripes. So this adds extra value to the comment. And we have also a comment from David Mkusi in the chat room. It says, in Rwanda, currently we are trying to decolonize heritage management practices by focusing on local community engagement. So how can this be possible, and what are the possible challenges likely to be faced? I think it's also a question that comes really close to what I would like to ask Leila. How is this Leila Hadjits, how is this your work with trying to create inclusive management plans and sort of attune what people think about heritage to what tangible heritage actually does? How does it meet with resistances, both from above, from state institutions, but also from below, from the people themselves?
Can I just ask you, why would you mention resistance?
I think because we're basically mostly, I think we're coming in at this from a mostly positive aspect, but most of our work in the field at the end of the day has to do with overcoming these resistances. I mean, we come with very good intentions of democratizing, organizing, bringing people together, and making the state or the institution listen to what the people have to say. But I think we are surprised, very much surprised by looking at by finding that people actually have a lot of resistances to that, even not only from the state point of view, not only from the institution point of view, but also from below. But we're always sure that the people are going to come forward and embrace our project. But I think that a lot of the difficulties actually have to do with also people resisting to our project or to the way we come into the field.
Mm.
Yes.
I understand. Well, so when we started, working in Albania back in 2008, I think that I can relate to what you're saying, and it's resistance that comes from lack of trust, from cynicism, from lack of understanding about what do you want to actually do and achieve and all this and all that. But I think what was essential in our work is consistency and persistence. Because what we understood is that when it comes to like if I start working as an organization in a city like Girocastra, and also having to encounter a city which is in a country that has been closed for like 50 years, and as well a country that wants to kind of quickly jump over barriers which are ahead and kind of move forward in a super speedy way. We have understood that only by being present, by accomplishing everything we said we would do, by being consistent in our approach, is the only way in which community members will then start recognizing you as someone to go to, someone to talk to, and when they are invited by you, then they do come and they do engage and they do share and they feel that this is a safe place for them, and as well they feel that this is a way, or this is a place where we can share and grow and do this together. So I think this was extremely essential. So therefore we started working in Girocastra in 2007, and we are still working in Girocastra, and I think we will continue working in, well, I don't think we will continue working in Girocastra, you see what I mean? So this is extremely important. Another thing I think is I still, talking with my colleagues, we still cannot believe that we need to explain the importance of cultural heritage to some. However, I think the global narrative and academics, scholars, professionals have done an outstanding job when it comes to bringing down the concept of cultural heritage to something that it's more of an understandable message. So be it either as a kind of interpretation of heritage in economical data or in the social data, or in in an as simple narrative as kind of its inheritance from your grandparents or whatever. I think it really has helped to all the practitioners on the field to embrace those arguments and actually talk in, let's say, everyday language, which becomes understandable to anyone who actually speaks about culture. But still, and again, we still are facing situations where we need to explain the importance of cultural heritage. And when it comes to, let's say, government, and why I mentioned that we are disappointed from time to time through our work because we don't see the systematic change. And this is where I think the compromise that the government is sometimes doing, especially on the account of built heritage assets, is something that we just cannot really get our head around. Because, and no matter that we all understand that the presence and existence of our built heritage assets in cities like Girocastra is a potential that it's probably one of the strongest ones to actually allow economic and social development of that city and bringing prosperity and bringing in other opportunities. But yet again, we have a government that maybe is kind of, compromising with that value for, something that they would call development or whatever. And then when you kind of try to stop that and try to hold that or try to criticize that, then of course you are the outcast. You are, stopping the development. You are, how can you do that? You don't understand. You don't have the vision. You live in history and all this and all that. So yes, these discussions as well are ever present, but I think they are important, and I think it's good they are there. And I think what is really good in this kind of era we are at is that at least those discussions, at least in our environment, do take place. So you can challenge, you can be challenged. So I think it's this ever-growing conversation that I think it's lowering the resistance and is as well allowing for more of a constructive dialogue and more of constructive solutions with the situation we're facing. I hope I made a bit of the tangent, but yeah.
No, I think definitely it was a great contribution to the discussion, and I think it resonates with what a lot of us are thinking now. That this is rather a process and not an event. It's something that we do and we build up, and we sometimes make mistakes. We go back to the drawing board. We have to take it up again, and then something changes. And it's a process. It's something that we look toward, but it's not attainable. Maybe not at the moment. Maybe not in in short instances, and then have to go back to it and look at it again. So and it's something that I think sustains us in these times of quarantine and global pandemic. But we're thinking of it not as something that needs to be done now, but it's something that has a future prospect. It's something that will lead us out of this impasse. Okay, we're gradually going into moving towards the end of this discussion. So I'd like to go back to Guy. Initiate my previous question. I was wondering how much. I mean, you're obviously the most expert of us all in digital aspects of heritage, and especially during the pandemic, there was a huge surge towards the digital. In museums, institutions, organizations, of course, in order to survive, actually moved to the digital as a last resort in a way, but also in a more as a horizon of possibility, as something that could be used even after the pandemic. But at the same time, I have the feeling that after this has been around us for at least for almost a year right now, that people are starting to get a bit tired of it. Also, that people want to actually go back to touching other people and shaking hands and hugging and actually talking to real people rather than doing it online. As interesting and exciting and as easy it can be to bring people together from around the world, like our discussion shows today. So I was wondering, I mean, what's your take on the future of this of the digital for heritage practice in general?
Yes, that's a brilliant question. Actually, I think you're absolutely right. Half of us wouldn't have attended this meeting if it was offline. So we would probably said, no, I don't have time, and who has the flights and everything else. So we kind of are growing. Everyone is growing, embracing this new world in a sense. Although this new world was there 2 years ago as well. We all had Zoom and the Teams and the Skype as well. So there's certain things changed. I think certain level of welcoming and a certain level of adaptation took place all across the globe. That's without a question. And also the technology companies adapted to that as well, made our lives a little bit easier in a sense. But it goes back to Leila's point about the long-term commitment and long-term engagement, I think. And it applies, in my view, to online and offline equal, because with the communities that we are talking about today, most of them are indigenous communities. If we are talking about the remote villages, for example, as in my case, in certain sites, they're very traditionalist communities who really, really deeply value long-term engagement. So the trust is built by being there for a longer term and showing your commitment in a sense. I think with the digital technologies and digital platforms, and I am impressed how many museums and how many research institutions adapted to the new reality, how much data was made available, and including places like UNESCO World Heritage Center, for example, usually a very slow to move type of organizations also switch to that. But them showing commitment longer term will also be the game changer. So for example, if you imagine a life of one of my students who look to these platforms to get some information, will they get regular updates? Will they be using those resources regularly? Or will it become like there are online resources that were created 10 years ago, never updated, never really refreshed with the new information, or even the platform hadn't changed. So, and I think there is a very good initiatives developing. So Museum Inside Me was an excellent example today. So it's not necessarily just making a big things available, throwing a heavy technology that like we do sometimes with our modeling work, with our GIS work, we make a huge map so only a few people can access them, but using the existing platforms, doing something accessible to everyone, I think, and doing that in the longer term again, that will be the game changer. So it's probably too soon. And you are right that the digital fatigue exists and all of us are suffering from that. And there is only a limited number of hours we can spend in front of computers, not only doing emails, but also consuming new information as well. So I think the fatigue is real. And but the platforms that we get engaged for longer, they will be more successful. Initiatives that will continue doing good things, I think they will be success stories for the future.
I'm very much not, I wouldn't say concerned, but I'm thinking that another aspect that we might have overlooked in the way that the digital actually influences all aspects of heritage now is the aesthetic. The aesthetic. I think that we are actually looking at the emergence of a hybrid aesthetic that is going to very much influence the way we perceive and imagine heritage in general. But I might be mistaken in this point. I'm just thinking of how, the visual, because heritage is a very much, unfortunately, visual thing, actually influences the way we understand heritage in general, and how, visual representations, and especially online ones right now, actually change how we think, what we think heritage is in the end. But that's, idler's thought, basically. All right, so, okay, if you have any comments for the conclusion of this workshop, we're already running a little bit late, and I'm also inviting not only our speakers, but Mr. Mikhail Marmarinos, who I see is also online. If you have any comments to contribute as closing thoughts, maybe.
Yeah, thanks for giving me this opportunity. It was strikingly interesting, the whole meeting, and thank you cordially for being witness. I want to stay on one line that Egidius brought up, it is really to be taken as a food for thought. Heritage does not end with the brain. And unfortunately, this digital world has pushed us on the chair. And we really miss, not only the physical touch, but the physical involvement. So he gave a hint about, let's say, musicalization, heritage, and so on. And yeah, it struck me, of course, because this is something that maybe we experience, but we're not all the time aware of it. And this is a big, I would say, corporal concern about our situations. Just that.
Thank you very much.
Can I comment
Yes,
on that?
please.
Yeah, it's very important comment, and a very big challenge for the heritage sector and for museums more specifically, because we've been working for years to create space in museums that will be multisensorial. So the kinesthetic, the bodily experience is part of the development of many projects. And now, not only did the museums close or when they're still open, this sensorial environment, immersive environment that involves our body has been put aside temporarily, I hope, because of safety risks. So one aspect is, yes, how much we can make a multisensorial digital space that is not equal, but similar to what we have in the museum. Because the real physical space can never be replaced fully by any digital medium. I may be sounding conservative now or old-fashioned, but I think we're talking about two different experiences. That not that they would be antagonistic between them, but complementary. So this is a time for experimentation in general. I think not only in terms of how we visualize heritage, and I agree with you that we create this certain aesthetics in heritage right now, but also how we talk about heritage, the language, how we interpret, which we have been doing all the years, but how this interpretation is now filtered and let's say coming out as condensed interpretation in the digital medium, especially in Instagram. That it's very dynamic. The surveys show that Instagram has been used extensively during the pandemic, but Instagram has a certain kind of aesthetics and language that develop around the medium. So a lot of interesting issues to study and take some results out of this. Your mic?
Sorry, I actually muted myself, trying to unmute myself. I think it's a very vital comment, and I think we're all waiting to see how communities will revitalize themselves, or even more importantly, how new communities are going to be materialized in the bodily form. I mean, if those new online assemblies actually find a way to translate into bodies in action in the field, in real life, and around institutions especially. So I think, yes, it's a very opposite comment right now. We're all, I think, we were expecting the worst, but I think now we're actually waiting to see interesting things happening. So unless there are other comments from our speakers to conclude with.
Yeah, just one comment. One comment to conclude, and this is where Maureen ended, the issue of interpretation and engagement. I think we are missing a point. We think we are engaging local communities and local people, but in real sense, they should be the ones who are engaging us, because we go to the site blinded sometimes, and we really need to get their knowledge, and they should be part and parcel of the interpretation we are making. I can cite one example which excited me 3 years ago, and this is the site of Raitori, a 3.6 million year footprint sites that were discovered by the Meririkis in the 70s, and they did not engage local people, and they did not take on board the interpretations of what these footprints are. And then in 2014, we covered another set of footprints, and we tried to talk to the people what those footprints are. They came up with conclusions like these are heroes of the Maasai. They are Maasai heroes who protected them, who have been fighting with their enemies, and they think these are the people which really did put the footprints on there. But from the scientific point of view, we knew these Maasai were not there 3.6 million years ago. It should be something else. And we can't say what they are saying is very true, but if we consider what they're saying and bring it on board, it's like they will become very happy and they will protect the site. They are not going to destroy it because they think they are protecting the footprints of their heroes. So we must think of doing a quite interpretation which is scientific, but do not forget to consider the mythical interpretation of the site, which might be very important in ensuring sustainability of the site. Thank you.
That's so true and so pertinent to our discussion today. And I think what you're saying about the mythic aspect of a place, which means that the things people say about a place and how it is important to their lives is actually a very good opportunity to imagine new ways of stewardship rather than ownership of a place. We also have examples from our work of local communities who do not define themselves as always being there or being ancestors of, I don't know, whomever lived there thousands of years ago, because they think they only recently came to the place, but because they recognize, this mythical character of the place, they take it up to protect it. They become stewards of the place without feeling that this place is theirs necessarily, in the way they define their identity, at least. So yeah, great comment. Thank you very much.